Concluding these dozen excerpts from A.J. Langguth's novel, Jesus Christ, we present the second half of the story, Jesus' Dilemma, where Jesus, as rebel military commander and former priest, has returned to his men and has spoken to his second in command, Judas, concerning their next move to leave their cave and take positions to observe the movements of the alien force who will be searching the area at dawn for the rebels. Jesus has agreed to take a post above them where he can observe the overview and fire 2 signal shots warning the rebels of an ambush. Following this story, the 11th vignette, entitled Historical Revision, presents a rather novel tourist scenario. While our final short, What Have I Learned, offers both food for thought and thought for food. We now open with the concluding half of Jesus' Dilemma.
Jesus was glad to be spared the company of the other men during the long wait, and he agreed at once.
We must begin soon. They will be out shortly before dawn, and we should be concealed before midnight.
With a few brusque motions, Judas grouped the men into small units and gave them instructions. Unless they heard the signal from Jesus, they were not to open fire. The reasons for this order were good ones. They would have to accept the word of their commanders. No one grumbled, and the older men looked relieved. Judas led out the group separately. For more than an hour, he ran between the cave and the rim of the natural bowl that seemed shaped to be an ambush site. Jesus had filled his canteen from the rain barrel and was setting out for his post when Judas caught up with him.
Sir,
Yes?
we have to do things that are wrong. Killing is never right, but sometimes we must do it.
We have all killed at one time or another.
Judas wanted to comfort him now for the slaughter to come.
I never tried to persuade myself that killing is right, but the world is wrong, and it forces wrongdoing on us.
We are the world.
What I wanted to say was that I don't deceive myself. I know it's wrong, even when it must be done.
Judas dropped away soundlessly, and Jesus continued his climb to the ridge. The nights were cold in the hills. Dressed in black silk shirt and trousers, Jesus trembled from every wind that blew through the hollows. He tried to huddle low enough for the rough grass to cover him. In front, he pushed down the underbrush until he could see along the trail the aliens were expected to follow. Jesus, never outside his province, feared all aliens, and he knew his troops shared this fear. The enemy could swoop from the sky like eagles, jump out of the green flying trucks, and fight until those trucks lifted them out of the jungle and back to their bases. The men asked Jesus why his God should have given such power to the aliens. He said that God had given to the loyal soldiers strong hearts and great skill, and to make them test these gifts, a heartless enemy with 1,000,000 machines. When he had stood watch on this ridge in the summer, Jesus could often hear all the voices and noises of the village below. This night, the rain had left behind a thick vapor that swallowed the lights below him and smothered any sound of life. He was reminded of nights at the temple school when young boys strained to carry in tubs of hot water, and the novices, blushing to be naked, crouched in the steam, hiding and cleaning themselves. In the night fog, Jesus shivered from that same nakedness, but he felt neither hidden nor clean. He thought, if we are to save our souls, we should not be asked to save our county and country. Jesus considered the paths Judas straddled. As a soldier, Judas could kill. As a man, he could not. And so he tried to lay down his manhood each time he took up his rifle. Even that compromise could not save Jesus tonight. He had climbed this ridge as a soldier, and now he was going to refuse to kill. I know I am wrong, he thought. I can share that much courage with Judas. I won't pretend that I am right. The spike-edged grass bore into his back. He shifted silently to blunt the pressure of its blades. Some men love to sit in this tall grass at night, digging their fingers into the soil and dreaming of the day they would return to their farms. All his life, Jesus had been different. He preferred to be inside a temple with its incense and its traces of poppy smoke from the pipes of dying priests. He had liked the daytime when he could be with other men, reading under a roof, and he found himself alone in the grass at night. His passion had been spent during the 3 days of futile prayer. It was half-heartedly now that Jesus asked his God,
Tell me that I am not to kill. Your command would wipe away my fear and cowardice. Even Judas could accept my betrayal. God, I pray to you, sanctify my treason.
He expected no answer and got none. Usually the aliens struck shortly before dawn. In that way, they could summon their aircraft at the first light and pursue the guerrillas with rockets and bombs. But from the look of the sky, the morning sun would be lost in a fog that would hold the planes on the ground. In 5 hours, Judas and the others could be back in the cave, alive and with their rifles unfired. He worried for nothing. When Jesus had been downhearted in the past, he comforted himself with a vision of the country in 20 years' time, after the guerrillas had freed the capital and restored peace. He had imagined the school children in his own village. They would be the children of those same infants he now saw being carried around the market, at desks in a clean, modern school. They would be reading about this unreal war and memorizing the names of the first John and the other heroes. For those children, the studying would be a chore. Even the boys who learned to respect the first John could never know that he had been a cursing, loud man who swaggered under the weight of his gun belt and needed freedom the way other men need food. Whenever he had pictured the school, the idea of young faces untroubled by war or hunger had touched him. This night, he found himself resenting their bored looks as they read about the Great War. If he could not rouse himself tonight, his name might appear in their books as a traitor. They'd learn of him as a man who falsified his orders and risked the lives of the men he led. Sitting in snug classrooms, they would not hear his body cry, no more killing. They would believe that he had been a coward. If the writer of their book said Jesus had taken money from the aliens to lay down his arms, they would believe that.
It is not just. I must live in the world, but I will be judged by scholars who have avoided life, writing for children, who have not begun to live. Something is lost. Life is lost. The cry of my body is lost, and a generation of children will sneer or spit when they speak my name.
4 hours had passed before Jesus detected in the distance the first dull sound of movement. The aliens tried so hard for silence that they made a noise like nothing else in the jungle. Instead of creeping steadily with a rustling that might have been the wind, they moved in stealthy, short bursts, and their steps shook the earth like the beat of a bass drum. The thumping had become louder. Jesus stretched to see if the red pinpoints of their cigarettes were burning through the darkness. He saw no lights. Their discipline meant they were older and better trained aliens who would be less easy to elude. A scout from the first unit appeared on the trail, about 50 feet from where Jesus hid. The overcast moon revealed nothing but a dim profile that reminded Jesus again of the alien's great size. The man stood a full foot taller than Jesus, and the muscle of his arm looked as big around as Jesus's waist. As the man moved forward, raising a leg, setting it down, Jesus saw others behind him. His own heart had begun to beat loudly, and he wondered, as once he had wondered when he played a child's hiding game, if the pounding in his chest could carry to his enemies. He knew better, and he thought, our fear speaks only to us. Unless we tell them, the men around us never have to know that we're afraid. Every one of the aliens was huge. Peter said their forefathers had spread their seed among apes, and that all aliens were half beast. John said they merely ate more than other people, and that the patriots would defeat them with the weapons of hunger and privation. It had been Thomas who said what they all had considered. The aliens were gods whom the patriots had no right to resist. Soon afterward, Thomas had been killed in the confusion of a battle. As he watched them pass, Jesus saw that the men were moving 4 abreast across the clearing rather than in the pairs Judas had expected. There would be twice as many men on the mission then, and aliens could fan out in patterns that the girl had not charted. Moving around Judas's trap instead of through its center, these men could surround the patriots and gun them down. Jesus knew he had to warn his comrades. He held his rifle ready to fire the signals that would send the patriots scattering to safety. He could fire the shots, dart through the brush, and join them at the old cave. The gun butt weighed on his palm. Its thin barrel rose out of the grass like a burnt stalk. He laid his finger across the trigger, but his fingers did not tighten, and he knew he would not fire. Cowardice said, Judas will see that he is outmaneuvered and outmanned, and he will keep the men silent until he can lead them back to the cave. Fear said, Warning shots will set off a slaughter, and you will emerge from this hiding place to find a dead body in every clump of grass. His body said, "No more killing." Jesus put his rifle down. Cowardice said, "If you shoot, you will guarantee a massacre, for the aliens will pursue your men and kill them all. This way, as long as Judas obeys your instructions, they are safe. You have betrayed no one. You have chosen prudence and caution. Since you have done nothing, you are blameless." Jesus asked himself,
Why is cowardice despised when it is such a friend of man? Why is bravery esteemed when it offers only pain and death?
The aliens had passed, and the silence of the mountains surrounded Jesus again. He heard nothing but the low voice of his body speaking through his pulse. Then, so soft and muffled that it might have been a trick of his ears, a shot was fired. The next barrage was thunder, Jesus told himself, but the sky did not light up. Each new burst of bullets came faster, and the sounds of gunfire crossed each other until no single rifle could be heard. The crashing carried through the hills to Jesus and rocked him with its force. He felt his face twisting with fear. In the midst of the din from the valley, he listened for the reassurance of his body. But a tremor shook him, and it said, "Kill!" He sat in the grass and knew about betrayal. Not long after the shooting had stopped, an alien soldier turned a beam of light across the ridge and spotted Jesus in the underbrush. He shouted something that must have meant,
"Come out."
Jesus rose, leaving his rifle in the grass. He folded his hands behind his head and joined the alien on the path. The soldier grunted and prodded Jesus down the hill with the tip of his rifle barrel. As he obeyed, Jesus had no thoughts in his head. He saw that the fog was lifting after all, and that the dawn was not far off. The beauty of the dark hills etched itself on his vision for an instant and was gone. When they approached the ambush site, Jesus began to see the bodies of the men. They had fallen into the grass, and he saw only a leg or an arm. If a hand was large and luminous, it belonged to an alien. Even in death, the guerrillas fitted better into the landscape. Once he tripped on the body of a loyalist who had been caught on the path when the shooting had begun. He steadied himself with a hand on the thin chest of a comrade he could not identify. Behind him, the alien profited from his stumble and walked around the corpse. The light, when it came quickly. By the time the guard ordered Jesus to stop, the sun was strong enough to make them both blink. The alien smoked a cigarette. Jesus, who did not smoke, was glad the guard did not offer one to him, for he was not sure how to refuse. All his life he had been polite, and now there was something ugly about politeness. They waited a long time. The alien soldier was talking to himself, taking only a few puffs on his cigarette, throwing it to the ground, grinding it under his boot, lighting another. Jesus thought how the waste would hurt John, who loved to smoke and rarely got the chance. John would be safe with the other wounded men in the cave. The girl would bring them food. As the waiting dragged on, Jesus wondered why the nervous alien did not shoot him there. He must be an underling who had to get orders from his commander. Jesus understood why the alien government had sent soldiers to his country, but he looked at his guard and wondered why the soldiers had agreed to come. The man was tanned except around the eyes, where he had worn dark glasses. There, under his pale eyelashes, the skin was brown and purple from fatigue. He must have a reason, Jesus thought. He must believe he is fighting for something. My cause is just, and I betrayed it. His cause is false, and he has kept its faith. 3 men drew close to them. One was a tall alien, no different from the man who guarded Jesus. Another was a traitor, hurrying along like a hungry dog at the alien's heels. The third was Peter, marching forward at the point of the alien's gun. The guard with Jesus approached his alien comrade respectfully, said something, and gestured toward Jesus. The alien commander came closer to inspect the new prisoner. Jesus looked into his eyes and saw that their lids were skinned back in a way he recognized. After other battles, the loyal soldiers who survived had returned to the cave with eyes thrust open in the same way. After a day had passed, the lids drew down and became a shield again, until that blankness in their eyes was covered. Jesus had turned away from their faces. Now he thought,
We have always recognized the aliens by their height and the color and odd shape of their eyelids. But this morning, the commander's stare makes him kin to every soldier he has killed. I wish I, with my narrow eyes, have become the alien.
speaking the liquid sounds of his alien language, the commander said something to the traitor, who translated it to Peter.
Do you know this man?
The traitor asked, pointing to Jesus.
I have never seen him before.
Peter said contemptuously,
He's part of your company of outlaws.
Our company had only brave men.
You lie. He's one of yours.
Only the traitor slaves of aliens lie. I tell you, my friends are dead, but our cause will triumph.
Shut your mouth.
The traitor relayed Peter's denial to the commander. He spoke fluently in the alien tongue, the natural manliness of his own voice sinking into a soft whine. Twice he pointed to Jesus, and once he drew his pistol, but the commander shook his head and turned his wide, blank eyes to the ground. Jesus knew he would not be killed. The traitor came back to him with a look of revulsion.
You,
When Jesus did not respond, he said,
pig.
Jesus lifted his head.
The Allied commander refuses to shoot you as you deserve. He says that if you had been with the others, you would have warned them. He says there is no evidence against you. They have the weapons, our allies, but they have no courage. We must forever show them the way for real men to behave. If we were alone, I will cut off your tongue, so you will lie no more. I will rip out your eyes, so you might begin to see how your outlaws are destroying this country.
Jesus' head drooped, and the traitor slapped him hard to raise it. The sound made the alien commander look back and speak sharply.
He says, no brutality. Can you understand any soldier who must fight your kind of vermin saying no brutality?
His dark eyes searched Jesus for the last time.
I'm letting you go, but as soon as you run off, remember that I might forget my orders and shoot you in the back. You better run fast and keep running, for if I ever see you again, I will shoot off your head.
Jesus walked away. The light was sharp, and he began to recognize faces on the bodies. He came upon in the grass. From one corpse, the back of the head had been blown off, and gray juices from inside his skull were soaking into the ground. It was Judas. Jesus knelt by the body and took the cracked head in his arms. He cupped his palm to scoop the fluid from the earth. Dirt had mixed with the juices, and Jesus packed this mud into the wound. He took off his own black shirt and wrapped it tightly around the head so none of the juice could run out again. With his head swathed in black, Judas looked sinister and whole. Jesus, with no place to go, started to walk faster.
We may each consider asking ourselves and others before drawing any final conclusions, where and when does killing fit or serve the cycle of life and death? Switching to a lighter vein, here's a piece called Historical Revision.
They had walked all over the old city until they found themselves at the biggest of the mosques, a pile of red sandstone, not very different from the famous fort. Heat on Sunday seemed worse than on weekdays, and Jesus felt sun searing his long hair. In 2 months, he was going to be 50, and he had stopped thinking about a message from God. John was with him. Their guide had opened an ornate wooden door at one end of the gallery. To enter, they had to duck below a string decked with bits of cloth, offerings from the city's poor.
We did better with a few old rags.
They are destitute here.
The guide said,
This is a hair from the head of the prophet.
a very coarse hair was taped to a glass slide.
You see, it is the color of ginger. That was his color. The hair is 1400 years old.
From AD 600?
Jesus asked. The day before, he had quarreled with some Hindus about the designation BC.
From the year 600?
John corrected him, and the guide nodded before ducking again into a dark closet.
This is the footprint of the prophet.
The man said, thrusting a piece of marble before them.
It was a miracle. When the prophet stepped on the marble, it melted and left this impression.
John said, before Jesus could say anything.
That's at least the same.
Is it the imprint we saw here before?
It is. The hair is new, but that's the same slab. This place had been finished a year or two before we got here. You didn't like it.
The color is faded. It's better now.
Their guide disappeared inside. Jesus knew that John was worried about him and waited until the man was gone before he began to mock the relics.
I think that print is the one I made for a theater.
Of course not. This one is marble. I remember it.
It looks wider than my foot.
It wasn't yours. Don't you remember?
I'm an old man, John, a shaky old man, a disgusting, repellent, lazy, hopeless old man. Keep that in mind.
I only said hopeless. I can't believe you couldn't.
I can't. You'll have to accept what I tell you. What about the footprint?
John liked to reminisce, and he drew Jesus to the pool at the center of the mosque.
You remember Stephen?
Vaguely.
Out of the shade, Jesus' head began to throb. He wanted John to be quick, but they had not had much to say to each other during the trip, and he also wanted to prolong this talk.
One of the 7, Stephen.
I know.
Jesus laughed, a sound he didn't like.
He was always in trouble. Why do you suppose? He would do the same things or say the same things I would do or say, and they loved me and despised him.
Stephen was with us that time. Not here, but not far. I forget, a little south, as I recall.
Yes.
You were sick, or that's what we call it then. You wouldn't move. We had a tent for you, and you lay in there all day. You wouldn't come out, you wouldn't eat. You were surly and rude to everyone.
That's right. Mother had come to see me.
Your poor mother. That was a long trip in those days. She stuck her head in the tent, and you threw something at her.
A rose.
A rose. It left a welt. You were as bad as I've ever seen you. And all the time, plans were going ahead for the ceremony. We hope you will pull out of it in time.
Something like now.
All the zest went out of John.
No, then you were part of it. We could get you over the bad times.
Now it's all bad times.
Let me go on. There you were in your tent, not moaning, not saying anything, just lying on the rocks and staring at the tent pole. The day came and you were no better. We were panic-stricken. Thousands of people were supposed to hear you, and then they were to witness a miracle afterward.
The marble.
John flushed.
The wax. We were dealing with very simple people. They will listen, but the footprint will convince them. Anyway, we finally settled on Stephen. They had seen the rest of us, but he was new to the camp and an imposing figure.
Fat.
John let it pass.
We started with a prayer, and that went smoothly. Then Stephen led into Judaism, and that puzzled most of the people. Oh, only about 2,000 had shown up.
Stephen was never the draw I was.
John laughed, a sound they both liked. He rose, and they walked together down the faded red stairs to the street.
We took the imprint of his foot in wax and substituted the marble block he had prepared. For an hour, We prayed and sang over the miracle. As we were ready to send everyone home, a few of the elders came forward and started putting questions to Stephen. What may we eat and drink? How many wives can a man have? What is heaven like? Well, you know, Stephen.
Not really.
He answered them. Paul was there, biting his tongue. It was wonderful. I've never seen anyone so angry.
I've been spared Paul's wrath.
To your face. So there was Stephen talking off the top of his head about 4 wives. And Paul, who believes castration is too good for most people, nodding his hands and clearing his throat and pulling his beard. He tried afterward to explain away Stephen's speech, but it was too late. They'll found a Messiah more to their taste.
Jesus looked back at the mosque, warm red in the late sun.
Does anyone see Stephen now?
He dropped out of sight. Somebody saw him later and said he insisted on being called by the name they'll given him.
Delusions. The occupational hazard.
Where shall we go now?
Back to the hotel?
John stepped off the curb to find a taxi. He was glad he had made up the story. The session with the Hindus had taught him that things were bad enough now without the old jealousies.
Lifelines seem to be considerably affected by how comprehensive the point of view. Completing these readings, we give you a short, what have I learned?
What have I learned? That what men call goodness is nothing more than a search for pain, though what they call evil is the inflicting of pain. 2 brief lessons, only long enough to threaten my existence. Rising again, I ask myself, can I live if they don't eat my flesh? Can I die if they won't drink my blood?
Okay, for myself, the term reciprocal feeding comes to mind. As one partakes of a meal, it's good to recognize a life form has died, most likely killed for your sustenance. And just as JC asks, can I live if they don't eat my flesh? Can I die if they don't drink my blood? Just who or what, from the larger view, will each of us be food for and does a deeper, finer understanding of life and death cycles prompt curiosity, endurance, gratitude, and a few words over what we are about to devour, a few words of grace as we contemplate what a Eucharist, a transubstantiation, or some form of a messenger's, a JC's eating of the flesh and drinking his blood might possibly refer to or mean. This concludes our rendition of excerpts from A.J. Langguth's Jesus Christ.